The place of preparation. You know, we all started at a place of preparation, and I want to remind you of what that was because you might not remember it. But it's when you were in your mom's womb. God had you in this hidden place that you didn't know and that you weren't aware, but he was putting you and stitching you together. And some of you guys might have seen this go viral this last week, but there's this picture of this baby and a woman named Amanda Foster in Cincinnati. She, before every single ultrasound, would get down on her knees in the OBGYN's office and say, God, put your hand on my child. Oh, it's going to make me emotional. God, lead him, guide him, help him. And she brought this ultrasound picture home, and her daughter goes, who's touching the baby's head? And the mom never even recognized it, but I want to remind you in Jeremiah 1:5, it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Who is a prophet? Someone who speaks what God says. Job 12:10 says, in his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. If you don't think God cares about you, I want to just start off by reminding you, you don't know what God spoke over you when you were in your mother's womb. You don't know the battles that you actually fought before you even got here, because the enemy did everything he could to keep you from getting here. You know, my second son, I actually had a miscarriage the year before he was born. He was born on a year to the date that I had had my miscarriage. And I remember I was in my car with my husband, and sorry, I'm crying from the start, but God's just been stirring this in me because I was in the car with my husband and we were just talking. And a man walked up to our window and he knocked on the window. And we're like, oh my word, this is kind of weird. And we were like, yes, sir, are you okay? And he was like, I was actually wondering if you had any money. And I was like, oh, shoot, no, I don't carry cash anymore. Does anyone else here not carry cash anymore? I'm like, do you have tap here? But he was like, and then all of a sudden he stops and he goes, actually, no, never mind. He goes, I need to tell you something. He goes, do you love Jesus? I was like, yes, we love Jesus. He goes, I have to tell you, that baby back there in your back seat, he had to fight for his life. The enemy did not want him here, but God is going to use him greatly. And I started crying. And he goes, you know, you lost a baby girl. And I was like, okay, like who is this honestly homeless man talking to me? Like, God, what is happening? And sorry, I didn't expect to cry this much from the start. But I was like, who is this man that's talking to me, that's just saying all these things? But you know what I remembered is that God will use anybody to speak what he needs to say. And we need to let him use us like that. Because I see that in my son. I see that God has made him to be a fighter, that he's made him strong. And you know, God made you to be strong. He made you to do something so specific on this earth, and it started in an unseen place. It started in a place of preparation. And you know, unfortunately for a lot of us, we get confused as we get older when we are in these places because they feel lonely, they feel separated from other people, they can feel uncomfortable and just filled with uncertainty. But one of the things that I've learned in my life is that before God does something through you, he must do something in you. And if God has pulled you away for a season, if you're in a season where you're not sure what you're supposed to do next, he's trying to show you something. He's trying to speak to you. Maybe you don't have close friends right now. Maybe you've been displaced in your job. Maybe your relationship is broken. Maybe your kids are far from God. You're in a place of preparation. God is about to do something through you, but he has to do it in you first. And you know, this place of preparation, it's where God shapes us. It's where he shapes our character. You know, I've asked this before, and maybe you've asked this before, but have you ever been in a season and you're like, is this from God? Like when that guy was knocking on my window, I was like, good thing we're in Texas and I have a gun. But then it was just totally, because I was open. You know, you guys know the enemy wants you to not be open. Because God can speak to you through anyone and at any time, but you have to be open. I remember from a young age, we'd be passing by places in cars because my dad was a traveling evangelist and we would travel a lot with him. And I would be looking out the mirror, or not the mirror, the window, and I would see cows. And God would speak to me because there would be all these brown cows in a field and there'd be one white one. And God would be like, that's you in the world. You're supposed to bring my light. And I was like, as a young kid, I'm like, okay, cows. But I loved animals. God will speak to you however he needs to speak to you. Maybe you go to a store and they have a discontinued lip gloss and all of a sudden it's right there and you're like, God, you knew I love that. He cares. He does. It's so funny, but like the littlest things will happen like that. Does anybody else have a time on a clock that you see all the time? He will get your attention. But it's in this place of preparation that sometimes we've got to just stop trying to figure it out, and we've got to just be open enough to hear from him. We want God to change our circumstances, but what if God wants to change you through your circumstance? Have you ever considered that you don't have it all figured out? Have you ever considered that you might not know what God's always doing? Can you trust him enough to follow him? Can you trust him enough to let him shape you and form you? You know, I remember there was a time when my sister was pregnant with her daughter, Livy. I was standing there with her because I'd never had a baby before, and I was like, what if you had to, like, think about everything that was being created that day? And she's like, I would have a book out, an anatomy book, and I'd be like, okay, an ear. This is what an ear needs. Like, imagine, that's how we actually try to act in our life. Like, I've got it. I can handle it. And God's like, you don't even know how to make an ear. Like, I'm doing it in you. Like, thank God we don't have to think about forming our babies in us. God just does it. That is a picture of what God does through our lives if we just trust him. It's in the unseen that he forms things, that he shapes things, that he works. Being pregnant and being a mom and just waiting on God in general for something is the ultimate faith test. It's the ultimate trust test. And it shows you how much you don't trust him when you worry. The things that you worry about shows you where you're lacking trust in God. You know, in Luke 2:52, it says, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. How many of you know if Jesus had to grow, we need to grow? You might not realize this, but Jesus was in this place of preparation for the first 30 years of his life. You can't really see a lot in the Bible about his life before 30 years because God was preparing him. He was maturing him. He was shaping him. Yes, even Jesus had to grow in favor with God and man. You know, a lot of you guys might know who Paul is in the Bible. I actually really like Paul because he started out as a rebel and he had his whole amazing, miraculous change on the road to Damascus. But what I didn't even fully understand until really getting into this message is that he had these hidden years in Arabia. So he had this experience with God and he was changed. But guess what? He was a Christian killer. He was like an expert Christian killer. So he knew that there were disciples out there, but actually in the Bible in Galatians 1:17-18, it says, this is from him, I did not go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went to Arabia. Later, I returned to Damascus. So he was on this road to Damascus, and he didn't go to talk to the disciples and be like, I had an encounter with God. No, you know what he did? God brought him to a place of preparation. He brought him away for years to work him through, to help him understand, to mature him. Some of us, we think that it's not happening in our life and we're frustrated at God. And he's like, I love you too much to let you go there before you're ready. I got to do it in you before I do it through you. Clap for yourselves in God, yes. And you know, we see in Philippians, this is actually my main verse for today I want to read to you, but in Philippians we see Paul is writing this letter to the church of Philippi, and he was actually in prison. And he was not like in a good circumstance here, but God was using him in this season to spread the gospel. And he was doing this inner work in him so that he could do an outer work in the earth. And how could prison be a part of God's plan? How could divorce be a part of God's plan? How could loss be a part of God's plan? How could what you're going through be a part of God's plan? The thing that we know that the Bible says is that he works all things together for the good of those that love him. So when you're wondering that, why wouldn't it be a part of his plan? You just haven't reached the part that you can see it yet, because only looking back do you see the faithfulness of God. So in Philippians 2:12-13, I really want you to hear this. It says, continue to work out your salvation, that is, cultivate it. Bring it into full effect. Actively pursue spiritual maturity with awe-inspired fear and trembling, using serious caution and critical self-evaluation to avoid anything that might offend God or discredit the name of Christ. For it is not your strength, but it is God who is effectively at work in you, both to will and to work. That is strengthening, energizing, and creating in you the longing and the ability to fulfill your purpose for his good pleasure. You see, it's the work that he does in you that matters most, not what everybody sees that he does through you. He can't do it through you if he doesn't do it in you first. And so when we look at this, it's not that you're working out your salvation, meaning you're earning it. What that means is mature in your belief in God. Don't just say, like most people, oh, I'm a Christian. Like, I think it's 80% of people in America would say they're Christian, but belief does not make you a Christian. It's how you live. It's the revelation of what you believe and how it transforms your life that makes you a believer. You could say, well, I said the prayer, but how does your life look in response to that prayer? Your life should be transformed. So sometimes we've said the things, but we haven't walked it out. And that doesn't mean that you've lost your salvation. It just means you need to mature it. You got to work on it. You got to strengthen it so it can be in its full effect. You know, I've used this example a lot, and I was noticing the other day when I drove up on our property that our trees have grown. It's a positive thing because our trees used to be uprooted every single time strong winds came through in this parking lot. It was like, oh, there goes that tree again. And you know what's interesting about trees, because we look at a tree and we think that's beautiful. No one looks at a root system and goes, wow. Unless you trip over one of the roots and you're like, wow, where did that come from? But these roots that grow underground, before we ever see this visible growth, they go deeper and stronger, and that helps the tree become more tall and resilient and strengthened to where it can actually grow fruit. The strength and the stability of the tree depend on the hidden and unseen growth of the roots. And we all want the visible fruit, but roots aren't very sexy. We're not like, yeah, I've been growing. You know what's funny, like even about working out? Have you ever like gone to the gym for a while and you're like, do I look different? Is there a bicep there? No? It takes time. This place of preparation takes time, and God's time is not our timing. And you know, some of us, we think that we're preparing, but you're actually trying to do things and they're killing your peace. That's not preparation. You forgot that God's the one who does the work in you, not you. And you're trying to strive and push your way through this preparation, and God's like, baby, stop getting stressed out about things that you can't make happen anyway. Some of us are just running these scenarios in our minds, and we're playing out all these scenarios of what might happen, but what if it never does? I remember I was talking to one of my friends, and she was like, do you just play out all these scenarios in your mind and you talk through things all the time? I'm like, no, it's just dead in there. I'm like, things happen, I'm like, oh. Like, you know, well, the one area that this happens to me is if, like, I'm walking around, I'm, like, thinking, if someone comes up behind me over here, I'm going to do this. And then if someone comes at me here, I'll go like that. Like, that's the scenarios I play if I'm, like, out in a city I don't know. But, like, if I'm going through life and stuff's happening, I'm like, it's fine. And my friend asked me, she's like, how do you just not care about stuff? Like, when stuff stressful happens, how do you not care? And I'm like, I just look at the big picture and I go, does this matter in, like, 5 minutes? If you can just ask yourself, before you get all emotional about stuff or frustrated, can you ask yourself, should I care about this in 5 minutes? Like, people cutting you off in Teslas that say student drivers everywhere. Is it going to matter in 5 minutes? Could you dodge them? You're fine. Just be like, God bless them. Help them, Lord. Get him another sticker on the car. Maybe it'll help. I don't know. But I wanted to read you this quote by Joyce Meyer. It says, worry is like a down payment on a problem you may never have. Why are you putting effort into something that's not what you want as an outcome? Stop putting your emotions and your time and your energy into things that you do not want, that you do not want to multiply. If it's not going to move you to the place that you want to be, stop spending time there. Stop ruminating on it. Stop practicing it. Stop thinking about it and thinking about what might happen. You know, I used to do that with my kids because I feel like the enemy messes with me about my children because they're in God's hands and they're God's children, right? And so I'm like, but what if they get hurt? What if they fall and I'm not there? You know what I started doing? Because it's really helped me. I was like, you know what, God, you made them. You take care of them. Like, when I'm not there, put bumpers around them. If they hit their heads, just heal it. Like, I'm going to do everything I can, God, but you got to do the rest because I can't. So I'm not going to keep worrying about it. Some of you need to just, like, shake that off and go, I'm going to stop worrying about it. Like, some of you need to do that right now. Like, I'm going to shake it off. I'm going to stop worrying about it. I'm going to stop rehearsing it, and I'm going to let it go. Say, let it go. How are you going to be prepared for what God has for you if you're preparing for worst-case scenario that might not ever happen? We want God to move in our lives right now. We want him to provide for our needs, resolve our struggles, and help us. We pray for situations to change, for circumstances to shift. However, there is a reality that we can overlook, that before God can use us greatly in the world, he must first prepare us. Thank God that he wants to prepare you before he just wants to use you greatly. Can you imagine? He's like, you got it, honey. You're like, what am I doing? Like, honestly, sometimes it felt that way in my life with my dad because he's pushed me to be greater. So he's like, you don't know how to swim? Get in the pool, you know? You can do this. Like, sometimes we need to be that for each other. You know your girlfriend's called to do something? Tell her, go do it. I'm right here, but go do it. We need to push ourselves that way too. But God, he will prepare you if you let him. He will send the right people. He will give you the right alignments. He will give you wisdom. All you have to do is ask for it. You know, just like a sculptor spends countless hours chiseling and molding a statue before it's revealed to the public, God works in hidden places to shape and refine us. Success to God is faithfulness. It's not about just winning. Your faithfulness to God in the place he's preparing you for may actually not be for you. It may be for your grandchild, your great-grandchild. Are you okay with that? What if your version of success doesn't happen, but what you do digs wells for future generations to drink from? I've had to settle in my mind, because, you know, we can have these desires, okay? Like, we want to do this, or we want to be this type of person, or we want to, be at this different level. I'm going to do everything in my power to be who God's called me to be, but it's God's job to do the rest. So I'm not going to strive. I'm not going to push for something that God can only make happen in my life. Because what I'm doing right now, who I am right now, might not be for me. It might be for someone else. And I've resolved I am totally okay with that. And you know, when you do that, that's when God can actually use you. When you're not worried about what other people think, when you're not worried about how everyone else sees you. There's this thing in ancient culture called hidden altars. And you can find these things in ancient buildings, but they have these altars, and they're like in a cathedral or a church or in different buildings, and they're like these small areas that are placed and concealed behind walls. They're not for anyone else to see, but they're to honor God. And I want to break down this word because I think it helps us to understand, but like an altar just means a place of sacrifice. And sacrifice means the act of offering something valuable to God as an expression of worship, atonement, or thanksgiving. You know, some of us are willing to give God what we're comfortable with. But giving him what matters most to us feels almost impossible. If you give that to God, what might happen? If you give God that relationship, if you trust God with your health, if you just go all in, what might happen? But until you can let go of what you want, you will never have what God wants for you. You have to let go of what you want and say, God, I want what you want for me. That's a whole faith journey that I know that I've been through. When I went through my divorce and I was like single again, and I had like saved myself at 24 to get married, and I remember asking my mom, I was like, this is it? This is what I saved myself for my husband to have an affair and leave me? Are you kidding me? Like 6 years of my life wasted. And I remember talking to God. I'm like, God, I don't want to find any man in this church. That didn't work out. He grew up here since he was 9. It didn't work out for me. And I was like, you know what, God? I went through a season. I was like, I'll find him. Don't you worry. I'll find him. It didn't work out. It wasn't a great season. It was only 3 months that I tried that. But it didn't work out. And you know what I got to the point of, I went, you know what, God, whether I ever get married or not, I'm just going to follow you. I'm not going to be worried about what other people think about me. I'm not going to be worried about how they judge me for what I've been through or what they think about it. I'm just going to trust you. I'm just going to follow you. And 2 months later, I met my husband. Like, how does God work that way, that you just like, you finally let it go, and then he's like, this is what I've been preparing you for. Okay, here. And some of you guys are like, well, shoot, I need to get on that. But we have to just get to this point where we're like, I'm going to stop doing it my way. Like, whether it's through your brokenness, your hurt, rejection, whatever it is for you, you got to stop doing it your way. You got to stop trying to figure it out on your own, because you have really great plans and thoughts, but they can hold nothing compared to what God's are for you. I want to ask you, do you have things set up in your life to remind you of the goodness of God? Do you have something that you've put in front of you that when things get hard, when times get hard, you remember, God showed up for me here, he's going to do it again? Because what happens in our life when we go through a hard time is we start going, God, why did you do that for them and not for me? And we forget all the times he has showed up. We forget that when you see that in a friend's life, it's supposed to encourage you. It's not supposed to discourage you. But if he can do it in them, what can he do in your life? He knows what you need. He formed you in your mother's womb. He spoke life into you. He gave you a calling and a destiny and a future. He knows better than you know yourself. I want to give you a visual of this in Joshua 4:8-9. It says, so the 12 men chosen from God, the sons of Israel, did as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel, just as the Lord had spoken to Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they were spending the night, and put them down there. Then Joshua set up a second monument of 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, at the place where the feet of the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant were standing, and they're there to this day. I want to share this with you because they're going to show you these pictures. This is just an example of what it would have looked like. But those are big. I don't know if you realize, those are like big rocks. Like when they say they carried 12 stones, like, how? They didn't have like heavy machinery, like Rod Vilhauer wasn't there to like get something to lift it up. Like they were carrying these rocks as an altar to God. They were sacrificing to remember as they carried his presence. Wherever his presence went, they wanted to be reminded of where he brought them from into the promised land. And they wanted to remember that path. So not only did they have this altar on land that they could see, but they had one in the middle of the Jordan. Why? That's weird. Sounds weird, but I want to explain it to you. Not only was there an altar on the shore that everyone could always see, but there was an altar in the middle of the river. The purpose of this was there would come a time when a drought would hit the land and the river would begin to dry up. And it was at this time in their lives that God wanted them to be able to see and remember how he had shown up before. Where is your altar that when you go through a drought, when you go through a hard time, you can see, no, I'm not going to fall for it, devil. I'm not going to fall for it. I'm not going to start trying to take control back because I remember what God did for me. And if he didn't do it for you, I remember what God did for them. You know what I reminded myself of whenever I went through my divorce? I asked my family, and at this point it's different in my family, but at that time I was like, has anyone in our family ever been divorced? And I was like, no. At that time, no one had. And I was like, but my mama was. And I remembered her story because she had breast cancer, and at that time, they would not just take your breast, but they would burn you with radiation. So her whole body was burned from head to toe, and her husband left her for her friend once they took her breast because he said, you're not a woman anymore. And my whole life growing up with her, I never heard her speak bad about him. If I ever asked about him, she still prayed for him. She was still kind to him. And I remember talking to my dad about it, and I went, I want to be just like that. I can look to someone, and I might not understand, and I might not be as great as her, but I can go, you know what? In the midst of cursing, in the midst of negativity, I'm going to bless. I'm going to speak positive. I'm going to look at my life and say, God, you're still faithful, because it's not about them. It's about he loved me enough to remove something from my life that wasn't for me so that I could have what he was going to give me. We've got to change our perspective. It's not how we always see it. There's this place of preparation that God wants to shift your mindset. He wants to shift your heart, but you've got to be willing to create space for it. You've got to be willing to be open to it. I remember when I was laying on the couch when I was having my miscarriage, and my other baby was laying on me, and I felt like my body was betraying me. I haven't spoken about it a lot publicly because my sister's gone through a lot too, and you know what? A lot of you guys have too. I was laying on the couch, my son was laying on me, and I was like, God, I don't know what you're going to do, but I trust you. I had no idea a year exact to the date he would give me my other son. But you know what I decided? I decided I was going to name that baby, and I named her a name that meant God is my oath. That no matter what happens, I'm going to trust you, God. I'm committed to you. My life's not going to be perfect. Your life's not going to be perfect. Not everything's going to go your way. We live in a fallen world, but you have an amazing God that is faithful, that's always going to come through for you. And you might not always know how to show up, but you can at least show up and ask God for strength. You can show up and ask him for wisdom. You can show up and ask him for alignments, and he's going to do it for you. You know what's so amazing about this place of preparation is that it doesn't really ever stop, but you start to see it different. You don't feel as lonely. You don't feel as hurt. You start seeing it for what it is, and you go, okay, God. You get this check in your spirit where you're like, okay, God, I get it now. I see what you're doing. Never forget in the darkness what God showed you in the light. There's stuff that God's going to show you this week. There's stuff that God has already shown you this weekend. And you know what? In your life, you're going to go through hard times. You might not be in a hard time right now, but you will. But you can remember, this is my family. I don't have to do it alone. You know what's the best thing about believing in the God that we believe in? I always say we don't follow a religion. We have a relationship. We don't have to do all these things to get God to love us. He loved you before we even knew him. And you know what's so amazing about it is that no matter what we go through, he's there. No matter what you face, you're not doing it alone. I don't know any other God that can do that. I don't know any other God that comes down to you and he catches your tears. He collects your tears. What kind of God does that? One who deeply loves you. You know, 2 Samuel 22-29 says, you, Lord, are my lamp. The Lord turns my darkness into light. You might not know how to get light back in your life, but you can say, hey, God, turn on the light in my life. You might be dealing with depression. You might be dealing with anxiety. You might be dealing with something that's so big you don't know how to fix it. I have good news for you. You don't have to fix it. All you have to do is understand who your source is. What if what you're going through is preparing you to help someone else? What if your breakthrough is going to open up the door for somebody else? The things that you struggle with the most or that have been a major battle in your life are meant to be the very things that God uses to help others. Sometimes we take actions in response to where we are instead of based on who we know God's called us to be. But God wants to use your battles as an altar of his goodness that leads others to him. I've always thought about that. Like when I go through something, I've been like, God, why something else? Like, have I not been through enough? Like, I think I'm good. I've got like a lot of lessons to help people with at this point, but I think of it like every time I'm picking up a stone and I'm stacking it. And it gets higher and higher and higher so that you can't miss it. You can't miss God's faithfulness in my life. Because every single battle, I'm going to give him the glory. I'm not going to look at myself and go, wow, I made it through. No, God, I can't do it without you. And when you start relying on him in that way, what you start realizing is, in your weakness, he is strong. In your weakness, he not only shows up to go, oh, I've got you. No, he adds strength to you. Every single time the enemy thinks he's got you down, no, God just handed you another sword to cut him down. You just got to pick it up. Hebrews 12:11 says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. You have a choice. to learn. You have a choice to be trained by the discipline that God allows into your life. Don't you think God knows what he's doing? Doesn't he order your steps? Your difficulty is preparing you for your destiny. Oswald Chambers says, God's preparation takes time. He's not in a hurry, and neither should we be. His purpose in us is not the immediate outcome, but the eternal fruit that is grown over time. You get to decide how you feel about something or someone. I want to show you this image. Do you know that your emotions last 90 seconds? This is the cycle of emotional regulation. I'll let you read that for a second. So you have a trigger, sets off an emotional response. A stress hormone is released in the bloodstream. Chemicals activate your nervous system, increasing your heart rate and breathing. This response begins and ends within 90 seconds. Your body reacts to an emotion for 90 seconds. That's it. The rest is up to you. If you choose to stay in an emotion, that's 100% your choice after 90 seconds. You're choosing to practice this cycle over and over. And I've been there. You may not be hearing every single thing I'm saying today because you might be thinking that sounds nice, but you don't know me. I don't feel strong enough. I'm not sure I have what it takes. I don't necessarily talk about things the way you do, or I'm not sure we have the same type of personality. Well, I want to give you an image. Do you know that researchers in Texas studying a fish called the Danny O'Neill cerebrum, a little translucent fish the size of your fingernail? Look how tiny that is, okay? They just found that their sound levels can reach up to 140 decibels, which is comparable to the noise level of a gunshot or a jet engine at close range. They're louder than an elephant's trumpet. You may see yourself as small, but God knows the power he put in you. When I saw this fish, I went, this is how some women see themselves. They're like, it's just insignificant, it's just small. Like, I don't know, I'm not, that's not who I am. But you've got a roar inside of you. Charlotte said, sometimes we roar, sometimes we sit back. You have this strength and this power of God inside of you. It doesn't matter how necessarily you see yourself. It doesn't matter how others see you. And it definitely doesn't matter how the enemy sees you. What matters is how God sees you, and he's made you strong and powerful and beautiful. And until you trust God in the now, you will never get to the next that you want. I want to read something to you, and I want you to hear it as if God was speaking it to you. You're about to step into your winning season. A season where God releases you to be mighty for him, because it's not about you anymore. It's not about what you want. It's about what he's doing and who he is. What you've been walking through was developing you, preparing you, helping your character match your calling. Growth never feels good, but God will allow you to be humbled before he elevates you. He will not let you walk into your next bitter, settling for less, or thinking small. Your mindset needs to match your mantle. Everything that you want that you don't have is outside of your comfort zone, and there's going to be a trade-off for this kind of growth. You don't get to go to the next level by stepping up. There will be something you have to give up to go there, a sacrifice that will help build the altar so others can find God. I feel like today can be a defining moment for you, because whether you realize it or not, you're in a place of preparation. I don't know what it's for each one of you, but you have the opportunity right now to step into a winning season. I had no idea that Pastor Keith was going to say it was Access Month, that everything was going to shift. That's tomorrow, guys. Tomorrow. It starts today, though, because guess what? As you start to come into agreement with what God says, as you start to prophesy, speak what God says, you will start to see what God's doing. And today I want to pray for you, because this isn't going to take actually a lot of you having to figure anything out. It's just going to take you being willing to take some steps and release some stuff. Because some of you have some things that you've been holding on to because you think you have to, whether it's brokenness, whether it's the fact that you have been deeply hurt and you're justified in feeling that way, what I want to tell you is I've been there, and that's not going to help you move forward. And it's not going to change their actions, and it's not going to make them sorry. All it's going to do is hold you back from where God wants to take you.